Commander Zexthara had witnessed the fall of 17 civilizations. Each one had begged for mercy when the Void Swarm came. Each one had surrendered their worlds, their people, their very souls to avoid extinction. But as she watched the human fleet position themselves between the swarm and the evacuation ships, something unprecedented happened. They weren't running. Instead, a crackling transmission cut through the chaos. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the U.S. Defiant. To all Allied vessels, maintain evacuation protocols. We'll hold the line." Zexthara's mandibles clicked in disbelief. The humans numbered barely 300 ships against a swarm of 50,000 bioships that had devoured star systems. Logic dictated immediate retreat. Survival demanded it. But humans, she was learning, didn't operate on logic alone. What followed would echo across every corner of the galaxy, from the crystal spires of the Etherian Collective to the deep ocean trenches of the aquatic hegemony. It would birth a legend that would outlive stars themselves. The legend of why no warrior in the known universe would ever refuse the chance to fight beside humanity. This is that story. The emergency klaxons of Kepler Station screamed through the corridors as Ambassador Varictal rushed toward the command center. His 6 legs carried his insectoid frame faster than dignity would normally allow, but dignity meant little when facing extinction. The Void Swarm had consumed 3 systems in the past month, leaving nothing but dead rock and cosmic dust in their wake. Status report. Varictal demanded as he burst into the command center. The massive holographic display showed the approaching nightmare, a writhing mass of organic ships that blotted out the stars themselves. 2 hours until they reach us, reported Station Commander Kethros, her reptilian features grim. The evacuation fleet can barely take half our population. The rest. She didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what happened to those left behind when the swarm arrived. "Wait," interrupted Lieutenant Jackson from the communication station. His amphibious skin flickered with bioluminescent patterns of confusion. "I'm detecting an approaching fleet. But these aren't evacuation ships." The holographic display shifted, revealing a formation of sleek vessels approaching from the outer system. They moved with purpose, their hulls gleaming with unfamiliar design patterns. "Unknown vessels, this is Kepler Station," Kethros transmitted. "You are heading directly toward a Void Swarm incursion. Recommend immediate course change to preserve your lives." The response came in a strange, melodic language that the universal translators struggled to process. Then, after a moment, words formed. "Kepler Station, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth ship Horizon. We receive your distress call. We're here to help." A stunned silence fell over the command center. Varictal's compound eyes focused on the display, studying these newcomers. The species was unknown to the Galactic Council records, bipedal, with soft-looking skin and primitive-seeming technology. Their ships, while elegant, appeared almost delicate compared to the armored dreadnoughts of established civilizations. Captain Chun, Varictal, stepped forward, activating the communication system. "I am Ambassador Varictal of the Galactic Council. You appear to be unfamiliar with the threat you face. The Void Swarm has destroyed civilizations that fielded fleets of millions. Your small force cannot hope to stand against them." A pause, then laughter, actual laughter, came through the comm system. "Ambassador, we appreciate the concern, but we didn't come here to run. How can we assist with the evacuation?" Kethros leaned forward, her clawed hands gripping the command console. "Captain Chun, you don't understand. The swarm consists of over 30,000 bioships. They consume everything in their path. The only rational response is evacuation." "Understood. How long do you need for the evacuation?" "At least 6 hours for a complete withdrawal," Jackson reported. "But the swarm will arrive in 2. Another pause from the human fleet. "Then, 6 hours it is. We'll buy you the time." The command center erupted in shocked chittering, hissing, and bioluminescent displays of disbelief. Varictal felt his primary heart skip a beat. "Captain Chun, did you not comprehend what we told you? 30,000 hostile vessels against your few hundred." "We heard you, Ambassador. Those aren't great odds." The human's voice carried an odd tone that the translator struggled with. Was it amusement? "We've faced worse." Before anyone could respond, the human fleet began moving into formation between Kepler Station and the approaching swarm. Their ships spread out in patterns that seemed almost artistic, creating overlapping fields of fire and mutual support. It was beautiful and terrifying in its implications. "This is suicide," whispered Commander Kethros. "No," said Captain Chen's voice, now broadcasting on an open channel for all to hear. "This is Tuesday." The first contact between the Void Swarm and the human fleet occurred exactly 127 minutes later. The swarm's bio-ships, each the size of a city block and covered in chitinous armor that could withstand plasma cannons, surged forward in their typical wave formation. They had used this tactic to overwhelm 1,000 worlds. What they encountered defied all previous experience. The human ships didn't attempt to meet them head-on. Instead, they danced. There was no other word for it. The sleek vessels moved in perfect coordination, creating a three-dimensional ballet of destruction. Their weapons, strange energy projectors that seemed to tear space itself, carved through the swarm's vanguard with surgical precision. "How are they targeting the nerve clusters?" gasped Commander Kethros, watching the display in amazement. "Those bio-ships have distributed nervous systems. You need to hit 17 specific points to disable one." 17 points hit simultaneously, Jackson reported, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every single time." The swarm responded as it always did, by sending more. Wave after wave of bio-ships crashed against the human formation like ocean waves against a cliff. But these cliffs moved, adapted, and struck back with impossible accuracy. Varictal watched a single human vessel, no larger than a Galactic Council frigate, position itself in the path of a swarm dreadnought 50 times its size. Logic dictated the smaller ship would be consumed instantly. Instead, the human ship seemed to split apart, its hull flowing like liquid metal to create dozens of smaller craft. Each one struck the bio-dreadnought at precise points, their weapons penetrating armor that had shrugged off planetary bombardments. The massive creature convulsed and died, its bioluminescent organs flickering out like extinguished stars. "Their ships are shapeshifters," reported one of the station scientists. "But that's impossible. The energy requirements alone." "Apparently, humans don't believe in impossible," Varictal murmured. Hours passed. The evacuation continued at desperate pace while the human fleet held the line. Ships that should have been destroyed reformed themselves. Pilots who should have been exhausted continued fighting with mechanical precision. Weapons that should have overheated kept firing with relentless efficiency. "How?" Commander Kethros asked no one in particular. "How are they doing this?" The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the evacuation ships had picked up a severely damaged human craft, and its pilot was now in the station's medical bay. Varictal hurried to meet this representative of the species that had just redefined the possible. The human was smaller than Varictal had expected, with smooth skin and bilateral symmetry that suggested a deceptively simple evolutionary path. But the eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond measure. "I'm Lieutenant Martinez," the human said, struggling to sit up despite the medical restraints. "How's the evacuation going?" "Nearly complete, thanks to your fleet," Varictal replied. "But I must ask, your technology, your tactics, they seem to violate several laws of physics. How is this possible?" Martinez smiled, a facial expression that somehow conveyed both humor and sadness simultaneously. "Ambassador, humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. We've been fighting for survival since we first looked up at the stars. But your ships, the way they move and adapt. Nanite construction and quantum processing," Martinez explained casually. "We developed them during the Soul Wars. When you're fighting in asteroid fields and gas giant atmospheres, you learn to make your equipment versatile." Varictal's translator struggled with several of the terms, but the implications were staggering. This species had developed technology that the Galactic Council considered theoretical at best. The Soul Wars, he inquired. Civil conflict. Lasted about 30 years. Taught us a lot about fighting smart instead of fighting big. Martinez winced as he shifted position. We learned that sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to lose. Before Varictal could ask for clarification, alarms began sounding again. On the display screens, the impossible was happening once more. The Void Swarm, after suffering losses that should have triggered their retreat instinct, was regrouping for another assault. But this time they were adapting. The bio ships began moving in new patterns, their armor shifting to deflect the humans' exotic weapons. They had learned. That's not good, Martinez observed, somehow reading the tactical display despite being an entirely different species. They're getting smarter. Will your fleet retreat now? Varictal asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Martinez's laugh was soft but filled with dark amusement. Ambassador, humans have a special relationship with impossible odds. The worse they get, the more stubborn we become. On the display, the human fleet was indeed adapting to the swarm's new tactics. Ships began linking together, sharing processing power, and creating weapon systems of unprecedented complexity. Energy patterns that looked more like art than warfare began carving through the reformed swarm formations. Evacuation complete, announced Jackson. All civilians are clear. Now, surely, the humans would withdraw? Instead, Captain Chen's voice filled the command center. Kepler Station, this is Horizon. Civilians are safe. Commencing Operation Cleanup. What followed redefined warfare for every species watching. The human fleet, no longer constrained by the need to protect the station, unleashed tactics that bordered on the incomprehensible. Ships moved through dimensions that shouldn't exist, weapons struck targets through folded space, and the very laws of causality seemed to bend around their assault patterns. The Void Swarm, faced with an enemy that fought like the universe itself had declared war on them, did something unprecedented in their million-year history. They retreated, as the last bio ship fled into hyperspace, leaving behind a debris field that would puzzle xenobiologists for decades. Captain Chen's voice returned to the comm system. Kepler Station, this is Captain Chen. Area is secure. Is there anything else you need help with? Varictal stared at the display, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. In the space of 6 hours, this unknown species had accomplished what the combined might of the Galactic Council had failed to do in a century of warfare. Captain Chen, he said slowly, I believe we need to talk. 3 weeks after the Kepler incident, as historians would later call it, Ambassador Varictal found himself aboard the human vessel Harmony, traveling toward the Galactic Council's seat of power on Nexus Prime. The journey gave him unprecedented access to human culture and technology, and what he discovered challenged every assumption about civilization itself. The ship's corridors bustled with activity that seemed chaotic at first glance, but revealed intricate patterns upon observation. Humans moved with purpose, their conversations a mixture of technical discussions and what they called small talk, apparently meaningless exchanges that somehow strengthened social bonds. Captain Chen had invited him to observe their daily operations, and Varictal was amazed by the humans' approach to hierarchy. Orders flowed down the chain of command, yes, but suggestions and innovations flowed just as freely upward. A junior technician could challenge a senior officer's decision if they had better information, and such challenges were not only tolerated but encouraged. We learned a long time ago that good ideas can come from anywhere, explained Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's xenosociologist, as she gave Varictal a tour of their research facilities. Rigid hierarchies are great for maintaining order, but terrible for adaptation. The research lab itself defied conventional understanding. Where most species specialized heavily, the Kethrani focused solely on biological sciences, the Zephyrians on engineering, the aquatics on environmental systems. Humans seemed to blend everything together. Biologists worked alongside physicists, who collaborated with philosophers, who consulted with artists. Art, Varictal inquired, his compound eyes focusing on a human creating colorful patterns on a canvas, while simultaneously monitoring quantum calculations. Pattern recognition, Dr. Kim explained. We found that creative thinking often leads to breakthrough solutions in technical problems. Lieutenant Torres there has solved more navigational puzzles through painting than most computers could manage. Lieutenant Torres looked up from his work, paint still on his fingers. The way colors interact on canvas is similar to how gravitic fields overlay in hyperspace. Sometimes the best way to understand a complex system is to feel it rather than calculate it. This integration of logic and intuition appeared throughout human culture. Their military tactics blended cold strategic calculation with what they called gut instinct. Their technology merged precise engineering with adaptive improvisation. Even their language reflected this duality. They had words for concepts that other species expressed through complex mathematical formulas, and mathematical formulas for emotions that other species considered purely subjective. How did your species develop this way? Veritao asked Captain Chun as they sat in her ready room, watching the stars streak past at faster than light speeds. Chun considered the question while sipping a hot beverage called coffee, apparently a mild stimulant that humans consumed both for its chemical effects and its cultural significance. Survival pressure, mainly. Earth wasn't a kind planet to evolve on. She activated a holographic display showing humanity's homeworld. Veritao gasped. Most civilized species evolved on worlds of stable climate and abundant resources. Earth was a nightmare of extremes. Massive ice ages alternating with volcanic periods, continents that drifted and collided, weather patterns that could shift from calm to catastrophic in hours. Ice ages that lasted millennia, Chun continued. Supervolcanoes that blocked out the sun for decades. Asteroid impacts that wiped out most life multiple times. The only species that survived were the ones that could adapt faster than the planet could kill them. And humans were one of these species? Chen's smile was rueful. Humans were the species that learned to adapt by working together. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most intelligent life form Earth produced, but we're the best at cooperation under pressure. She showed him images of human history, groups of early humans surviving ice ages by sharing resources and knowledge, building the first cities by coordinating massive construction projects, exploring their planet by pooling expertise for navigators, engineers, and diplomats. Every major advancement in human civilization came from combining different types of expertise, Chen explained. Our first spaceflight succeeded because we brought together pilots, mathematicians, engineers, psychologists, and even poets to capture the public imagination. Poets assisted with spaceflight. Public support was crucial for funding. The poets helped people dream of reaching the stars. Dreams become budgets, become reality. This pattern of synthesis continued throughout human development. Their first contact with alien life, ancient automated probes from a long-dead civilization, led to a fusion of archaeology and advanced engineering that produced breakthrough technologies. Their expansion into space required combining skills from thousands of different specializations. What about the soul wars you mentioned? Veritao asked. Chen's expression grew somber. Our greatest shame and our greatest teacher. When we first colonized other planets in our system, different colonies developed different cultures. Mars became heavily militaristic due to the harsh environment. The asteroid miners developed a culture of extreme individualism. The gas giant research stations became obsessed with pure knowledge. The holographic display showed images of sleek spacecraft engaged in combat among the rings of Saturn, orbital bombardments of Martian cities, desperate evacuation ships fleeing burning space habitats. For 30 years, we fought ourselves across the solar system. Each faction thought their way of life was superior and tried to impose it on the others. The war only ended when we realized we were about to destroy everything we'd built. What changed? The Titan incident. A weapons test went wrong and destabilized one of Saturn's moons. The explosion would have killed everyone in the outer system. Miners, researchers, military personnel, everyone. Suddenly, all our differences seemed pretty trivial compared to mutual extinction. Chen showed him images of former enemies working together in makeshift rescue ships, sharing life support systems, coordinating evacuation efforts across vast distances of space. We saved about 80% of the outer system population. But the lessons stuck. We're stronger together than apart. The technology we developed during that crisis, the cooperation protocols we established, they became the foundation of our modern civilization. The ship's intercom chimed softly. Captain, we're approaching Nexus Prime. The Galactic Council has requested immediate audience. On our way, Chen replied, then turned to Varric Tau. Ready to see how the galaxy reacts to meeting us officially? The council chambers of Nexus Prime had been designed to accommodate the galaxy's most diverse species. The massive amphitheater could adjust its atmosphere, gravity, and lighting to suit beings as varied as methane-breathing crystalline entities and deep-sea aquatic civilizations. But as the human delegation entered, Varric Tau noticed something unprecedented. Every single council member was present. In the 1,000-year history of the Galactic Council, full attendance had occurred exactly 7 times for the founding of the Council itself, the creation of the trade protocols, the establishment of the Universal Defense Pact, the First Contact Accords, the Great Plague Response, the Stellar Engineering Treaty, and the Void Swarm Crisis Declaration. Today would be the 8th. Honored representatives, Varric Tau began his introduction, his voice carrying across the chamber through quantum translation fields. I present Captain Sarah Chun and Dr. Marcus Webb, representatives of the species known as humans, from the planet designated Earth. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. The crystalline hegemony's representative chimed in harmonics that translated as shock. The Deep Dweller's ambassador released bioluminescent patterns of disbelief. The machine collective's speakers produced computational sounds that their translators struggled to parse. Counselor Zeth Kree of the Apex Confederation rose first, his massive frame dominating his section of the chamber. As the galaxy's preeminent military power, the Confederation had lost more ships to the Void Swarm than any other civilization. You claim this species single-handedly defeated a Void Swarm incursion. His voice boomed. The same force that has consumed 3 of our battle fleets. Captain Shin stepped forward, her small frame dwarfed by the massive alien architecture, but her voice carrying clearly. Counselor, we didn't defeat the swarm. We convinced them that attacking us was more trouble than it was worth. Elaborate. Dr. Webb activated a holographic projector, filling the center of the chamber with a detailed recreation of the Kepler battle. The Void Swarm operates on a simple principle: consume resources while expending minimum energy. They've succeeded across the galaxy because most civilizations fight them the way they want to be fought. The hologram showed typical galactic fleet formations, massive dreadnoughts arranged in orderly battle lines, trading devastating volleys with equally massive bioships in straightforward exchanges of firepower. Large ships, predictable tactics, hierarchical command structures, Webb continued. The swarm has evolved specific counters to these approaches over millions of years. So how did you defeat them? Demanded Counselor Vexthera of the Scientific Collective. We didn't fight the swarm, Chen replied. We fought the universe itself and made the swarm part of our battlefield. The hologram shifted, showing the human fleet's impossible maneuvers. Ships that split apart and reformed, weapons that struck through folded space, tactics that seemed to violate causality itself. Impossible, stated the Machine Collective's representative, their electronic voice flat and certain. Our calculations show that such maneuvers require energy outputs exceeding stellar output levels. You're absolutely right, Webb agreed. If we try to power those maneuvers through conventional means, we need to carry small stars in our fuel tanks. Then how? Chun smiled, that peculiar human expression that somehow conveyed both amusement and challenge. We don't power our ships through conventional means. We power them through unconventional ones. The hologram zoomed in on a human vessel, its hull dissolving to reveal its inner workings. Instead of the fusion reactors, antimatter cores, or zero-point generators that powered most galactic technology, The human ships contained something that made every scientist in the chamber recoil in shock. "Those are quantum vacuum fluctuation harvesters," whispered Counselor Vextera. "But the theoretical energy requirements to build such devices exceed the total energy output of most civilizations," Webb confirmed. "We spent 60 years of total solar system industrial output creating our first prototype. It took another 20 years to miniaturize the technology enough for ship use." "But why?" demanded Counselor Zethkri. "What threat could possibly justify such an expenditure?" Captain Chin's expression grew serious. "Counselors, I need to share something about humanity that might be difficult to understand. We didn't develop this technology to fight the Void Swarm. We didn't even know they existed when we started the project." She gestured to Dr. Webb, who began displaying images of Earth's night sky as seen from human cities. Every clear night, humans look up at the stars and see the same thing: infinite possibility and infinite threat. We knew that somewhere out there, something existed that could end our civilization. We didn't know what it was, when it would come, or how we could fight it, but we knew it was coming. "You prepared for a threat you had never encountered?" "We prepared for every threat we could imagine, and then we prepared for the ones we couldn't imagine," Chen replied. "That's what humans do. We look at the universe and see everything that could go wrong, and then we figure out how to survive it anyway." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. These beings had spent centuries preparing for unknown dangers, developing technology that most civilizations would consider impossible, all because they believed that somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, something was waiting to destroy them. And they had been right. "Counselors," Varric Tal said, breaking the silence, "I believe we need to reconsider our approach to galactic defense. The humans have proven that the Void Swarm can be defeated. Perhaps it's time we learn how." But even as he spoke, Varric Tal sensed that this revelation was only the beginning. If humans had prepared for unknown threats for centuries, what other capabilities might they possess? And, more importantly, what threats had they foreseen that the rest of the galaxy had missed? The answer to that question would come sooner than anyone expected. 6 months after humanity's introduction to the Galactic Council, the universe changed forever. The first sign came from the Outer Rim observation posts. Stars were going dark. Not exploding, not collapsing, simply ceasing to exist, as if someone had reached out and switched off their nuclear fires. Admiral Zextera stood in the war room of the Council's military headquarters, her 4 arms gesturing at the holographic star map with growing agitation. Red zones spread like a plague across the galaxy's edge, marking systems that had simply vanished from all sensors. 17 systems in the past week, she reported to the emergency assembly. No debris, no gravitational signatures, nothing. It's as if they were never there. The assembled representatives of 12 major galactic civilizations studied the display with growing unease. The Void Swarm had been terrifying, but at least it was comprehensible, a biological force that consumed matter and energy. This was something else entirely. "Any pattern to the disappearances?" asked Counselor Prime Keth Vin, his crystalline form refracting the hologram's light into rainbow patterns. "They're following our major hyperspace routes," reported Dr. Yilshin from the Navigation Guild. "Whatever this is, it understands galactic infrastructure." Captain Chun, now serving as humanity's official liaison to the Council military, studied the pattern with the intense focus that other species had learned to recognize as distinctly human. Her people had that particular way of looking at problems, as if the universe was a puzzle that could be solved through sufficient application of stubborn intelligence. "Admiral," she said quietly, "we need to evacuate the Zephyr cluster immediately." What? Zextera's mandibles clicked in confusion. "The cluster is nowhere near the affected zones." Chun pointed to the hologram, her finger tracing lines between the vanished systems. "Look at the pattern. They're not random strikes. Whoever is doing this is cutting off hyperspace lanes, isolating sectors. The cluster is the central hub for the entire Outer Rim. Once they finish clearing the approaches, they'll take it next," Zextera finished, her warrior's mind immediately grasping the strategic implications. That would trap 15 billion souls with no escape route. Evacuation of that scale would take months, protested Counselor Vexindra. We'd need to mobilize every transport in the galaxy. Then we better start now, Chen replied grimly. Because I don't think we have months. She was wrong. They had 3 days. The attack on the Zephyr cluster began exactly 72 hours later. The first sign was the hyperspace jammers, massive technological constructs that materialized at the system's edge, cutting off all faster-than-light travel. Then came the ships. They weren't like anything in the galactic databases. Sleek vessels that seemed to be made of crystallized space itself, moving with impossible grace and firing weapons that deleted matter at the subatomic level. They didn't conquer worlds. They simply made them stop existing. Unknown vessels. Identify yourselves. Admiral Zextera transmitted from her flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Vigilance. The Council's hastily assembled defense fleet, nearly 1,000 ships from 6 different civilizations, spread out in traditional battle formation. The response came in perfect galactic standard. We are the architects. You have built in space that belongs to us. You will be returned to entropy. Architects. Dr. Webb's voice crackled over the comm from the human research vessel Discovery. Admiral, I'm detecting technology signatures that predate galactic civilization by millions of years. The precursors, whispered someone on the command channel. Every spacefaring civilization had found their ruins, ancient structures of impossible complexity scattered throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council had built their greatest cities around precursor artifacts, trying to unlock their secrets. Now it seemed the builders had returned. All ships, open fire, Zextera commanded. The galactic fleet unleashed a barrage that could have sterilized planets. Plasma cannons, particle beams, antimatter torpedoes, and exotic weapons from a dozen different technological traditions lanced out toward the architect vessels. The weapons simply ceased to exist the moment they contacted the enemy ships. Impossible, breathed the crystalline hegemony's fleet commander. No shields can be that effective. They're not shields. Chen's voice cut through the chatter, her tone carrying that particular human mix of terror and fascination. They're probability manipulators. They're making the chances of our weapons hitting them approach zero. The architect counterattack was swift and devastating. Beams of twisted space-time reached out and touched 3 Council dreadnoughts. The massive vessels didn't explode. They simply folded into themselves until they occupied single points in space, then vanished. All ships, scatter formation. Zextera ordered, but it was too late. The architects had demonstrated their superiority. Now came the systematic destruction. That's when the human reserve fleet arrived. This is Admiral Torres aboard the UES Prometheus, a new voice announced. Council fleet, recommend immediate withdrawal to Rally Point Gamma. Admiral Torres, you have maybe 50 ships, Zextera protested. We're retreating because 1,000 weren't enough. Understood. We'll handle the rear guard action. What followed redefined impossible for the second time in galactic history. The human ships didn't engage the architects directly. Instead, they began doing something that made the universe itself rebel against their presence. Space around the human fleet started to ripple like water. Cause and effect began flowing backward, and the very laws of physics screamed in protest. What are they doing? Demanded Counselor Prime Kethvin from the safety of his evacuated command ship. Dr. Webb's voice came over the comm, filled with the kind of awe that scientists reserved for witnessing the birth of stars. They're weaponizing paradox. Admiral Torres isn't fighting the architects in normal space-time. She's creating a pocket universe where human technology has always been superior to architect technology. The explanation made no sense to anyone except humans, but the results were undeniable. Architect ships found their probability manipulation failing because they were fighting in a reality where human weapons had a 100% chance of working. Their matter deletion beams bounced off human hulls because the pocket universe remembered a version of history where humanity had always been immune to such attacks. How is this possible? Admiral Zextera demanded. Control timeline manipulation. Admiral Torres responded calmly, as if discussing weather reports. We developed it as a worst-case scenario protocol during the Soul Wars. If you can't win in the current reality, create a reality where you can win. The battle raged for 6 hours in a space where physics was more like a polite suggestion than an absolute law. Human ships phased through architect attacks that deleted sections of normal spacetime. Weapons that shouldn't have been able to harm million-year-old technology carved through architect hulls like they were made of paper. But the most astounding moment came when Admiral Torres did something that would be discussed in military academies for millennia afterward. All ships prepare for temporal extraction, she announced. Temporal what? Zexthara asked. We're going to steal their ship's past, Torres explained matter-of-factly. If these vessels were built millions of years ago, we're going to extract that construction time and add it to our own capabilities. The human fleet suddenly began changing. Ships that had been sleek and advanced became something beyond description. Vessels that incorporated technology from the architect's own past, improved and perfected through humanity's chaotic innovation. They became hybrid ships that existed in multiple timelines simultaneously, crewed by humans who remembered fighting this battle for millions of years. The architects, faced with an enemy that was literally stealing their technological evolution and turning it against them, did something they hadn't done in their entire million-year existence. They retreated. As the crystalline ships vanished back into whatever dimensions they had emerged from, the human fleet slowly returned to normal space-time. Ships that had been impossible hybrids of human and architect technology reverted to their original configurations. Crews that had experienced million-year lifespans during the battle returned to their normal memories. Status report. Zexthara requested, her voice shaky. 17 architect vessels destroyed, remainder withdrawn, Admiral Torres reported. Human casualties, 0. Human ships damaged, 0. Ow, Admiral. In the timeline where we've been fighting the architects for millions of years, we learned to be very good at it. The aftermath of the Zephyr cluster battle changed everything. Within days, every major civilization in the galaxy was requesting immediate military alliance with humanity. The humans, true to their nature, had one condition. We'll share our defensive technology, Captain Shun announced to the emergency council session. But we do this as equals, not as saviors. Every species contributes what they do best. What do you need from us? Asked Admiral Zexthara. Shun smiled, that human expression that other species were learning meant something wonderful and terrifying was about to happen. We need you to help us prepare for the real enemy. The real enemy? Counselor Vexander's tentacles writhed in confusion. What could be worse than the architects? The beings that the architects are running from, Chen replied quietly. Our long-range sensors have detected them on the galaxy's edge. Something so dangerous that million-year-old precursors fled rather than face it. Dr. Webb stepped forward, his human features grim. The Devourers are coming. Entities that don't just destroy matter and energy, they unmake the fundamental forces that hold reality together. The architects were trying to clear the galaxy before they arrived. How long do we have? Zexthara asked. 6 months, maybe less. The Great Alliance was formed that day. 12 major galactic civilizations, led by humanity, began the largest cooperative effort in galactic history. Humans provided the impossible technology and strategic innovation. The crystalline hegemony contributed their mastery of energy manipulation. The Deep Dwellers offered their understanding of space-time mechanics. The Machine Collective brought their computational power. Every species added their unique capabilities to the mix. But as they prepared for the arrival of the Devourers, one thing became clear to every member of the Alliance. Fighting alongside humanity meant more than sharing advanced technology or innovative tactics. It meant sharing their fundamental approach to existence. The refusal to accept that any enemy, no matter how powerful, was truly unstoppable. Humans have a saying, Admiral Torres explained to the Joint Military Command as they watched construction begin on the galaxy's new defense network. When facing extinction, the best defense is a good offense. What does that mean in practical terms? Asked Admiral Zextera. Torres' smile carried that particular human mixture of determination and madness that other species were learning to recognize as the prelude to impossible victories. It means we're not just going to defend against the Devourers, she said. We're going to hunt them. The Devourer fleet emerged from the void between galaxies like a plague of living darkness. Each ship was the size of a moon, constructed from crystallized entropy itself. They moved through space by consuming the quantum vacuum, leaving trails of absolute nothingness in their wake. When their sensors first detected them, every calculation indicated the same result: total galactic extinction within 72 hours. Admiral Zextera stood in the command center of Bastion Prime, the massive space station that humanity and the Alliance had constructed in just 5 months. Around her, representatives from every species in the galaxy worked together with an efficiency that would have been impossible before humans taught them the art of organized chaos. Devourer fleet composition confirmed, reported Dr. Yilshin, her crystalline structure pulsing with data flows from 1,000 sensor networks. 15,000 primary vessels, each capable of unmaking matter at the subatomic level. Estimated total destructive capacity, sufficient to end all organized matter in the galaxy within 3 standard days. Time until they reach the outer colonies? Asked General Kethval of the Aquatic Defense Corps. 18 hours, replied the Machine Collective's tactical processor, its electronic voice carrying undertones of what might have been fear if machines could experience such emotions. Admiral Torres materialized as a hologram in the command center, her image transmitted from the UES Infinity, humanity's newest and most impossible warship. The vessel existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and was crewed by humans who had volunteered to have their consciousness expanded beyond normal spatial limitations. Alliance Fleet Status Report, Torres requested. All species present and accounted for, Zextera replied, studying the massive holographic display that showed the greatest military force in galactic history. Crystalline hegemony has provided energy matrix amplifiers. Deep Dweller spacetime manipulation technology is online. Aquatic core environmental systems are managing the exotic atmosphere requirements. Machine collective processing power is handling tactical coordination. What about the new Alliance members? Zextera's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was amusement. In the past month, as word spread about the coming battle, species that had never before cooperated with the Galactic Council had arrived to join the fight. The gas giant dwellers who communicated through electromagnetic pulses. The silicon-based life forms from the galactic core. Even the energy beings from the quantum realm had manifested to contribute their unique capabilities. Everyone wants to fight alongside humanity, she said. They've heard the stories. The stories had indeed spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. How humans had faced the void swarm with impossible odds and won through sheer stubborn innovation. How they had turned the architect's own technology against them by rewriting the laws of physics. How they approached every battle not as a fight for survival, but as a puzzle to be solved through sufficient application of creative violence. Speaking of fighting alongside humanity, General Kethval interjected, his aquatic form rippling with anticipation. What's our strategy for taking on enemies that can unmake reality itself? Admiral Torres' holographic smile carried that particular human expression that other species had learned meant the impossible was about to become routine. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to cheat. The strategy she outlined violated so many laws of physics that the universe itself would need therapy afterward. The Alliance fleet would engage the Devourers in conventional space, drawing their attention and firepower. Meanwhile, humanity's newest ships would attack from directions that didn't technically exist. You're planning to assault them through the past, Dr. Yilshin observed, her crystalline structure glowing with the effort of processing the tactical implications. Past, future, and sideways through alternate timelines, Torres confirmed. The Devourers are used to enemies that exist in normal causality. We're going to hit them from temporal vectors they can't perceive. And if something goes wrong with the timeline manipulation, then we probably never existed in the first place, so it won't matter to us. Torres replied with a casual acceptance of cosmic destruction that other species found both terrifying and oddly reassuring. The battle began exactly as projected. The Devourer fleet entered the galaxy's edge and immediately began its work of systematic annihilation. Stars didn't explode when touched by their weapons. They simply stopped being. Planets weren't destroyed. They were edited out of reality's source code. The Alliance fleet met them in the emptiness between systems. 1,000 ships from a dozen species arrayed in the largest military formation in galactic history. It should have been a moment of triumph, representing unprecedented cooperation between civilizations that had once considered each other alien beyond comprehension. Instead, it lasted exactly 14 minutes. The Devourer's opening salvo deleted 300 Alliance vessels from existence so thoroughly that even their names were erased from the surviving crew's memories. Their weapons didn't just destroy matter and energy, they reached backward through time and prevented their targets from ever having been constructed. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Admiral Zexthera commanded, watching her tactical display as reality became increasingly negotiable. Implement Protocol Chaos. Protocol Chaos was humanity's gift to galactic military doctrine. Instead of rigid formations and predictable tactics, every ship began moving according to quantum randomness generators. Fleet movements became impossible to predict because they were determined by the fundamental uncertainty of quantum mechanics itself. It helped, but not enough. The Devourers adapted within minutes, their ancient intelligence beginning to predict even quantum randomness. More ships vanished, their crews experiencing the unique horror of being unwritten from history. Admiral Torres, Zexthera transmitted, "Whatever you're planning, now would be good." "Beginning temporal assault now," Torres replied, her voice carrying across dimensional barriers from a past that was simultaneously the future. "All Alliance ships, prepare for causality inversion." What happened next would be debated by philosophers and physicists for centuries. The human fleet, led by the UES Infinity, began attacking the Devourer fleet through time itself. Weapons fired in the present struck targets in the past. Ships destroyed millions of years ago suddenly reappeared to continue fighting. Crews that had never been born remembered lifetimes of battle experience against enemies that wouldn't exist for eons. The Devourers, faced with an enemy that was fighting them across the entire timeline of the universe, experienced something unprecedented in their billion-year existence: confusion. "It's working," reported DR. Yilshan, her sensors detecting massive disruptions in the Devourer formation. Their reality manipulation systems are being overwhelmed by the temporal paradoxes. But the humans weren't finished. "All Alliance vessels," Torres announced, "prepare for Operation Unity." "What's Operation Unity?" General Kethval asked. "Something we hoped we'd never have to try," Torres replied. "We're going to merge every consciousness in the Alliance fleet into a single tactical entity." The process was instantaneous and indescribable. Every sapient mind in the Alliance fleet, human, crystalline, aquatic, mechanical, gaseous, and even the energy beings from quantum space, suddenly became connected at the deepest possible level. For a brief moment, 1,000 different species experienced perfect understanding of each other's thoughts, fears, hopes, and dreams. And in that moment of unity, they became something greater than the sum of their parts. The merged consciousness that piloted the Alliance fleet thought with human creativity, calculated with machine collective precision, manipulated energy with crystalline mastery, bent space-time with deep dweller expertise, and approached problems with the combined wisdom of a dozen civilizations. The Devourers found themselves facing an enemy that operated on principles they couldn't comprehend. Ships that moved with perfect coordination because they shared a single mind. Weapons that struck with impossible accuracy because they were guided by the combined tactical genius of every species in the galaxy. Defense systems that adapted instantly to any attack because they incorporated the survival instincts of creatures that had evolved on 1,000 different worlds. But the true revelation came when the merged consciousness spoke, its voice carrying the harmonic resonance of every species in perfect unity. You seek to return the universe to entropy. You believe that existence is an aberration to be corrected. You are wrong. The Devourer fleet, perhaps for the first time in their existence, paused. Existence is not an aberration, the unified voice continued. Existence is hope given form. Consciousness is the universe learning to understand itself. Cooperation is how separate beings become something greater than entropy. What followed wasn't exactly a battle. The Alliance fleet didn't destroy the Devourer's ships. They convinced them. Using logic that spanned dimensions, emotion that transcended species, and examples drawn from the lived experience of 1,000 different forms of life, they demonstrated that existence was not a mistake to be corrected, but a miracle to be protected. One by one, the Devourer ships stopped their advance. Their reality unmaking weapons powered down. Their ancient consciousnesses, isolated for billions of years in their quest to return everything to primordial nothingness, began to consider the possibility that they had been wrong. We had not considered this perspective, came the Devourer response, their communication carrying overtones of surprise that rippled across multiple dimensions. You show us forms of existence we had not imagined possible. That's what we do, Admiral Torres said, her individual voice separating from the unified consciousness as the merger gradually ended. Humans have a saying, the best way to win a fight is to make your enemy into a friend. The aftermath of what historians would call the Unity Battle changed the galaxy forever. The Devourer fleet, convinced that existence held possibilities they had never considered, departed to explore other galaxies, not as destroyers, but as students seeking to understand the diversity of life. The alliance between species became permanent, formalized not through treaties or trade agreements, but through the shared memory of what they had experienced as a unified consciousness. Every species had felt what it was like to think with human creativity, to calculate with machine precision, to exist as pure energy or crystalline thought or aquatic grace. But perhaps most importantly, every warrior in the galaxy now carried the memory of what it felt like to be part of something greater than themselves. Years later, as Ambassador Varictal prepared to retire from his position as head of Galactic Human Relations, he was asked by a young reporter what it was about humans that had changed everything. It wasn't their technology, he said, settling his aged insectoid frame into a chair as he gazed out at the bustling spaceport, where ships from dozens of species worked together with casual efficiency. It wasn't their tactics or their weapons or their ability to break the laws of physics when it suited them. Then what was it? Varictal's compound eyes focused on a group of mixed-species military personnel sharing what humans called coffee at a nearby cafe. A young human officer was laughing at something a crystal engineer had just communicated through harmonic vibrations, while an aquatic technician and a machine intelligence competed at a game that required both logic and intuition. It was their absolute, stubborn refusal to accept that anything was impossible, he said. They looked at a universe full of ancient powers and cosmic threats and said, we can do better than this. And then they went out and proved it. And that's why everyone wants to fight alongside humanity. No, Varictal replied with a clicking sound that served his species as laughter. Everyone wants to fight alongside humanity because they taught us that the greatest honor in the universe isn't dying for a cause. It's living to see what impossible thing you'll accomplish together next. In the years that followed, that lesson would spread to every corner of the galaxy. The phrase, fighting alongside humanity, became synonymous with achieving the impossible through cooperation, creativity, and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. And across the stars, whenever young beings of any species dreamed of glory and adventure, they dreamed of earning the right to stand beside the small, soft creatures who had looked at an uncaring universe and decided to care anyway. For in the end, humans had given the galaxy something more precious than advanced technology or military victory. They had given it hope and the tools to make that hope reality.